President Cyril Ramaphosa wants $100 billion in investments within 5 years. He's using a second investment conference to make that happen. Trade and Industry Minister Ibrahim Patel says the first one is already working with commitments in vehicle manufacturing and food production. But economists are warning that an unstable electricity grid could scare off investors. To discuss this, we are joined by the President's economic advisor, Trudi Makhaya. Very good morning to you, Trudi Makhaya. All right, let's pick up with that. We've got an unstable electricity grid. How do you balance that sort of reality with the call for more investment?
Thanks, Jane. I think to begin with, I'm not comfortable with the framing entirely of the investment mobilization program, because it's not the conferences that are doing the work. There are institutions like Investors A and the rest of government that continually, every single day of the year, are working on investment promotion. So I think we should, events are important, but the work that back that up is even more important. I also just wanted to correct on the sectors. From last year's conference, there were commitments running from mining to IT to services, food processing. So it was a whole range of commitments which were made to the tune of just under 300 billion rands. On the electricity supply question, I think it's a risk that we're very alive to. It is one of the, it's probably the biggest constraint to economic growth at the moment. You would be aware of what's been done so far in terms of laying out a plan for reconfiguring the structure of Eskom to make it more transparent, to improve efficiencies. So that reconfiguration work is already underway with the Office of the Chief Reconfiguration Officer already set up. National Treasury also advanced cash to ensure that Eskom is able to maintain its going concern status and it's able to meet its obligations. So those are some of the things that are being done. But in addition to that, there have been many operational plans. Eskom itself came up with a 9-point plan to fix its operations. The President had an advisory task team looking at the broader strategy towards Eskom. And all of that is going to be brought together in a holistic paper that gives the operational strategy, the financial strategy, the governance strategy, that gives a roadmap of the full plan that Eskom, that government has for Eskom.
Okay,
of course, the roadmap will be flexible.
Can I jump in there? I mean, Eskom's just been granted 59 billion bailout again. The same things happened with the SABC. I mean, it's the intractable reality of our SOEs. And even though there is a plan in place, the fact is, the reality is that we are still taking money, throwing it at these debt holes.
Yeah, so this was the 59 billion is a confirmation of an appropriations that had already been committed. So this is just going through the parliamentary process. I take your point about these cash injections. They do come with strings attached. It's not a blank check. There are conditions in terms of operations, in terms of financial stability that Eskom, that SAA, SABC, that all of them have to, they have to go into an agreement with National Treasury, with the fiscus, with all of us really, to say that in exchange for this money, this is the plan for fixing this institution. And I think, and Treasury will be very strict in ensuring that that plan is adhered to, and that money goes into ensuring that these assets become exactly that. They go back to being assets rather than being a drain on the fiscus.
All right, so the pledge is made just over 300 billion. How much has entered our shores? How close are we to that figure?
So we must be clear, it's both local and international investment. Over the past few months, the President, the ministers have been going around launching the factories. You would have seen the launch of Mara factory in Durban about a week ago. The automotive factories are up and running. So in terms of our tracking, we'll report in more detail at the conference. But in terms of our tracking, we're seeing that most of the 300 billion is in some stage of implementation, where we see factories on the ground, or the money, Naspers had pledged a fund for entrepreneurs. That fund is up and running, investment has been made. So we do see the money flowing. Our tracking tries to ensure that we get regular reports from the companies. Of course, we're trying to promote investment in the private sector, so one can't be too intrusive, but we do follow and monitor to make sure that those pledges are happening.
Mr. Kaya, I spoke to The Economist the other day. They did an interview with the President, and they confirmed what we are experiencing here as South Africans, the impatience now when it comes to the President. A lot of talk, but short on delivery. When do we start seeing delivery? When do we start getting buy-in into Tito Mbowene's plan? What is the message to those attending the conference?
So I would really challenge that idea of no action. I think we often fall into the trap of thinking that action means that if there's a policy directive to issue spectrum tomorrow, there'll be an allocation. Of course, it's a process, and we have to keep monitoring those processes. I take that. But for instance, if you look at the address that the President gave when he welcomed the Economic Advisory Council, he gave a very detailed account, which is in the public domain, of all the things that have been started and all the actions that are being taken to remedy the economy. So now the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, is out. The Spectrum Directive has been issued. The Infrastructure Fund Implementation Unit is up and running. You can look at any policy area. The Mining Charter has been gazetted, not gazetted, has been issued, and the industry is broadly in agreement. There might be pushback here and there might be setbacks, but the idea that nothing is happening, I think, is totally inaccurate.
Nobody's saying nothing's happening.
They're
impatient,
very hard.
Sorry, at the extent of what's happening. I mean, and maybe it's better to frame it, the action that hasn't been taken. Those who are holding back the economy, tackling the unions, dealing with the corruption more effectively. These inquiries are not enough.
The inquiries are not enough until you see prosecutions, I agree, but you have to admit that the inquiries have to go through their own due process in terms of their own terms of reference. But yes, no one can pretend that it is all well until we start seeing a stream of prosecutions. I think, yes, one can quibble with the pace, but if one considers where we were 18 months ago and the path that we've traveled since then, I think that progress has to be acknowledged.